In this video, I'm going to walk you through the recommendation rules for the Sales Leadership Candidate Assessment. Now, this is our candidate assessment that we use to assess a VP or Director of Sales. So in some cases, you may see references to VP/Director. And one place you'll see that reference is right up in the quick URL that we have for accessing this guide. This guide can be downloaded at omgqlink.com/VPREC. So if you've watched our other guides that talk about how sales candidates and sales management candidates are recommended, you'll find that this is very similar, but there are kind of some unique aspects to how we determine whether a sales leader should be recommended to be interviewed. So just like with our other products, we have OMG criteria and client criteria. Now, in the OMG criteria, we're looking at three things. We're looking at, do they have desire? Do they have commitment? And where is their leadership quotient, their sales leadership quotient? What range does that fall into? So to meet the OMG criteria, a leader has to fall into the 130 to 173 range for sales leadership quotient. Sales leadership quotient is a combination, a weighted combination of the 8 sales leadership competencies. Half of those are around sales leadership, and the other half is more around sales management. So of those 8 competencies, we combine them into a leadership quotient. And to meet the OMG criteria, you have to have desire, commitment, and you have to fall into the strong or superstar ranges for leadership quotient. Now, if somebody falls into the serviceable range, but they still have desire and commitment, then they're going to have marginal on the meeting the OMG criteria, represented as a yellow flag. And if they're lacking desire or lacking commitment, or their leadership quotient falls into that undesirable range, then they're not going to meet our OMG criteria. Now, on the client criteria, we're looking at two things. First, there's the compatibility with the required experience for the role. And second, there's the alignment with the leadership strategies. So whenever you're looking at a sales leadership candidate assessment, you're going to find that compatibility, which has to do with their experience, and the alignment, which has to do with their strategies. We average those two numbers together, and if that average is 75 to 100, then they meet the client criteria. If it falls into the 66 to 74, then they're moderate on their client criteria. And if it's in the 0 to 65 range, then they don't meet the client criteria. And just like before, if you meet both, then you are recommended. If you're marginal on one, but you meet the other, or you're marginal on the other, then you're worthy of consideration. And if you miss either the OMG criteria or the client criteria, regardless of what the other is, then you are not recommended for an interview. And also, just like our other products, we have the, you can become worthy of consideration based on intangibles that are present. And if someone falls into that lowest scoring confidence, which happens when there's a combination of factors, then they're not going to be recommended. So let's take a look at our sample sales leadership candidate assessment. So this individual is worthy of consideration because they're missing the client requirements. So let's see what's going on here. So as you can see here on the dashboard, this says they're worthy of consideration. They meet the OMG criteria, but they're marginal on the client criteria. So as you may remember, the OMG criteria requires desire, which they have, commitment, and that leadership quotient needs to fall into one of the upper two areas, which we can see here. Their leadership quotient is 130, which is a strong. So they have to be strong or superstar to meet the OMG criteria. And then in the client criteria, you'll see that they ended up with flags on both the compatibility and the alignment. So if we scroll up and look at that, you can see that their compatibility is a 73, so didn't quite get to that 75%, and their alignment with the strategies is a 71. So again, didn't quite get to that 75%. So they end up marginal on their client criteria, and overall the recommendation ends up a flag worthy of consideration, because a check plus a flag will result in a flag. So this individual is worthy of consideration because they're missing the client requirements. So thanks for joining me for this quick walkthrough of the Sales Leadership Candidate Assessment Recommendation Rules. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to the client services team or your coach.